Welcome to Reformed Thinking.
Glad to be here talking about this with you.
So, to start this off, I want you to imagine something for a second.
Okay, I'm tracking.
Picture the Supreme Court, right? But they are convening at, like, 2 in the morning.
Oh, man.
Yeah, meeting quietly in some judge's private living room to sentence a man to death before the public even wakes up.
Completely in the dark.
Right in the dark. They just bypass all standard procedures, they lock the doors, and they rush a verdict.
Why? Because they're scared of the public.
Precisely. The defendant is way too popular to be tried in the light of day.
That's a terrifying scenario.
It is, but that is the precise level of illegal, panicked corruption we are looking at today.
Yeah, we are doing a real deep dive into our historical and theological sources today.
We are. We're examining a midnight trial that, well, it changed human history.
And we're focusing on the Gospel of Matthew, right? Chapter 26.
Yeah, specifically verses 57 and 58.
It's just such a scene of intense contradiction.
It really is. On one hand, you have the Lord of Glory, the incarnate Son of God, and he's just voluntarily submitting to physical bonds.
And then on the other hand, you have the Apostle Peter.
Right, who is physically free.
Yeah, physically free, but entirely paralyzed by fear, just trailing behind at a safe distance.
The contrast there is, well, it's staggering when you look at the mechanics of what is actually happening.
It really is. The scene we are examining today defines theological paradox, you know.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, you have the creator of the universe allowing himself to be arrested.
And dragged before the high priest, Caiaphas.
Yeah, dragged right into his house. It's a historical moment that redefines what it means to be bound and what it means to be free.
And it exposes this glaring disparity between the Savior's steadfast obedience to the Father's decree and then the terrifying ease with which a self-reliant disciple slips into spiritual compromise.
It really happens so fast for Peter.
It does. But to understand how all this unfolds, I think we need to build the historical stage a bit.
Yeah, let's set the scene for the listener. So we are in Jerusalem.
The season is spring, likely in the year AD 30 or 33.
And the city is just overflowing with pilgrims.
Because it's the bustling Passover feast, right?
Yeah, Passover. I mean, Jerusalem's population would swell from maybe 50,000 to over 250,000 people during this week.
That is a massive influx of people.
It's huge. And you have to understand the political climate to grasp the tension in the air.
Right. Israel is existing as a subjugated territory under the iron grip of the Roman Empire.
Yeah, and the Roman prefect, Pontius Pilate, he's actually in town.
With extra troops, right?
Extra troops stationed at the Antonia fortress, which it overlooks the temple.
So they are watching everything.
Oh, very closely. They are watching for any sign of a riot.
And operating under that heavy Roman shadow is the Sanhedrin.
Right, the supreme Jewish ruling body.
So that's a council of 71 elders, scribes, and priests.
And they are desperate. I mean, they want to maintain their localized authority, their wealth, their status.
And they know that keeping the peace with Rome is the only way to hold on to those positions.
Yeah, if a riot breaks out during Passover, which is a festival that literally celebrates Jewish liberation from foreign oppression, mind you.
Oh, the irony there is thick.
It is. If that happens, Rome will just send in the legions and strip the Sanhedrin of whatever limited autonomy they have left.
So sitting at the very top of that fragile hierarchy is Caiaphas.
Right. He is the acting high priest.
But he was appointed by Rome, wasn't he?
He was. And from everything we see in the historical sources, he operates much more like a political pragmatist than a spiritual shepherd.
He's a politician?
Very much so. And he's also heavily influenced by his father-in-law, Annas.
Who held the high priesthood before him.
Yeah. And Annas still pulls a massive amount of strings behind the scenes.
So that political pragmatism, it basically drives everything that happens next.
Totally. When we look at this midnight trial at the house of Caiaphas, what stands out is the sheer illegality of the entire event.
Yeah, the Sanhedrin was bound by strict Mishnaic laws of jurisprudence.
These were rigid legal requirements designed specifically to protect the accused.
Like for a capital trial where a life was on the line, the proceedings had to take place in broad daylight.
The Mishnah explicitly states that a capital case must be tried during the day and concluded during the day.
So doing this in the dead of night is totally out of bounds.
Completely illegal.
I am stuck on something here, though. If the Sanhedrin hated Jesus so much, and they had a mob out in the Garden of Gethsemane, why not just assassinate him right there in the dark?
That's a great question.
I mean, why bother dragging him back for a fake trial at all?
Well, that is the political pragmatism of Caiaphas kicking in.
Okay, how so?
because an assassination creates a martyr.
Oh, I see.
Right. If Jesus just disappears in the dead of night, the crowds will venerate him.
The rumors of his messiahship would just explode.
Exactly. Precisely. But a formal legal condemnation by the highest religious body in the nation.
That creates a heretic.
Yes. They needed to destroy his credibility, not just his body.
They needed the public to see him cursed by the law.
But to get that formal condemnation before the crowds could rally to his defense, they had to break their own rules.
Yeah, and they broke a lot of them.
Yeah.
Like, besides the requirement for daylight, they absolutely could not hold a trial on the eve of a Sabbath or a festival.
And this is the eve of the biggest festival of the year.
Right. Furthermore, even if a guilty verdict was reached, the law required a full 24 hours to pass before sentencing.
Yeah, the judges were supposed to go home, fast, discuss the case in pairs, and sleep on it.
To allow time for clemency or new evidence.
Yeah, none of which happened here.
The clandestine midnight nature of this trial just exposes the blinding hatred and the systemic corruption of these men.
The righteous lawgiver is being judged by men who are frantically trampling their own laws.
Just to secure a predetermined outcome.
Yeah, they maintain the outward forms of a legal proceeding, but the verdict was decided long before Jesus ever stepped foot in that courtyard.
They are terrified of his authority.
They really are.
Which makes perfect sense when we look at where Matthew places these events in his gospel.
Yeah, the literary context is crucial here.
If we zoom out and look at chapters 24 and 25, we just had the Olivet Discourse.
Right, where Jesus is speaking with absolute divine authority.
Talking about the end of the age, the destruction of the temple, and his return in glory.
Then we move straight into the agony in Gethsemane.
And right after the verses we were discussing today, we hit Peter's tragic threefold denial.
Matthew is a master of narrative structure. He uses verses 57 and 58 as a transition hinge.
So the narrative shifts abruptly.
Yes. We move from the violent, chaotic physical arrest in the garden right into the intense psychological and judicial interrogations.
Inside the high priest's residence.
Yeah. Matthew intentionally places the bound, arrested Jesus, and the physically free, trailing Peter side by side.
To draw a massive dichotomy between divine fortitude and human frailty.
That's the whole point of placing them together in the text.
I get why Matthew does that, but I do have a concern here.
What's that?
If we spend so much time analyzing Peter's failure, his cowardice, his physical distance, does that distract us from the suffering of Christ? Like, are we making the story about Peter instead of Jesus?
I completely understand that concern, but I think Matthew designed this whole literary framework specifically to magnify Christ.
How does looking at a failure magnify Christ?
Well, we look at Peter's wretched weakness only long enough to realize our own need for a substitute.
I see.
Think about Peter's background. Peter represents the absolute best of human intention and self-reliance.
Earlier in chapter 26, verse 33, Peter arrogantly boasted, "Though they all fall away because of you, I will never fall away."
Right. He was entirely confident in his own fleshly resolve.
He genuinely believed his willpower was stronger than his fear.
He was ready to fight. I mean, he even pulled a sword in the garden and cut off the ear of the high priest's servant.
He did. He was ready to go to war.
But fleshly bravado evaporates when the reality of suffering sets in.
Yeah, it really does.
By showing how quickly that resolve shatters, Matthew actually forces our eyes back onto the majestic suffering of the King.
Because Christ stands firm precisely where the best of humanity fails.
Yes. Matthew wants us to see that Jesus is walking a path that no sinful human could ever walk.
Okay, to truly see this contrast, I think we should look closely at the original Greek vocabulary Matthew uses.
Oh, the lexical choices here are fascinating.
The words chosen to describe the actions of the mob and the actions of Peter are remarkably revealing.
Let's look at verse 57.
Okay, the text uses the Greek participle kratasantes, which comes from the root word kratix.
And this is not a gentle apprehension.
No, this means to arrest or seize with physical force and aggressive authority.
When you look at extra-biblical literature from that era, like the Oxyrhynchus papyri.
Right, those ancient documents.
Yeah, the word krache is heavily utilized in judicial and military contexts.
It describes the violent apprehension of dangerous insurrectionists by state authorities.
It implies overwhelming physical domination. Jesus is aggressively manhandled.
They treated him like a violent threat to the empire.
Very much so.
Which raises an interesting psychological point. Why did the Roman and Jewish guards need to use overwhelming military force against a peaceful teacher?
Why do you think?
Well, they brought swords and clubs. I think they were genuinely terrified of him.
That makes a lot of sense.
They had seen him calm storms, cast out demons, raise the dead. They approached him like a military threat because he was a massive threat to their entire power structure.
Yeah, they used Caiaphas because they were scared. That is a very accurate assessment of their psychology.
They bind him tightly because they fear his strength.
Yet, grammatically, Matthew constructs the sentence so that Jesus allows himself to be the passive direct object.
Whoa.
Right. He is the one being acted upon, even though he holds all authority.
He could have called down 12 legions of angels.
But he restrains himself. He subjects himself to Caiaphas.
Then we hit verse 58, and the text shifts violently.
We get the Greek conjunction de, which translates to but.
But Peter. And the verb used for Peter's following is okaluthi.
Yes. This is an imperfect active indicative verb.
And that verb tense is vital for our understanding, isn't it?
It is. The imperfect tense in Greek denotes continuous, linear, lingering action in the past time.
So it means he kept on following or was following.
Well, right. It paints a picture of a hesitant, lingering action.
He took a step, he stopped. He looked around, he took another step.
Yeah, he's trailing cautiously. Meanwhile, the scribes and elders are taking decisive action.
The text says they were gathered together, using the verb synectizin.
And that specific verb, synectizin, feels like it carries a lot of Old Testament baggage.
It does.
Oh, definitely. It is a premeditated, coordinated assembly. It actively fulfills a prophetic lament of Psalm chapter 2, verse 2.
Where the rulers take counsel together or gather together against the Lord and against his anointed.
Right. The enemies of Christ are decisive, unified, and active.
While the disciple of Christ is hesitant, solitary, and lingering.
Yeah, the contrast is stark.
Think of this grammatical shift like a cinematic technique. First, the camera captures a decisive, violent mob successfully capturing their target.
Right, the action is sharp, aggressive, definitive. They are moving with purpose.
Then the focus softens, the camera pans away, and it captures a slow, hesitant spectator dragging his feet in the shadows.
We are watching a man caught between his previous bold claims and his current paralyzing fear.
The sharp action of the enemies versus the lingering hesitation of the disciple.
And that hesitant walking eventually leads Peter to a specific physical location.
A location that carries massive theological weight for the narrative.
Yes. The text says Peter followed apomakrathin, which translates to from a distance.
Let's establish the physical layout of where he ends up. He follows the mob to the high priest's residence in the wealthy upper city of Jerusalem.
And the architectural layout of a typical first-century high priest's house included an open central courtyard surrounded by elevated rooms.
This means Peter can sit down below in the damp, chilly courtyard.
And observe the trial happening in the brightly lit, elevated rooms above him.
The phrase apomakrathin is incredibly telling.
If we look at the Septuagint, which is the Greek translation of the Old Testament, the equivalent of that phrase translates the Hebrew word rashok.
And where do we see that used?
We see this specific concept in Psalm 38, verse 11. The psalmist writes about companions and friends standing far off, standing aloof from someone suffering a plague.
Oh, wow. So Peter's physical geography in that courtyard perfectly mirrors his spiritual alienation and his internal terror.
Yes, he is physically distant because his faith has faltered.
The text adds another crushing detail, says Peter sits with the guards or the servants.
The Greek phrase is meta tun hypereton.
He sits down at the charcoal fire to see the end, or to see the outcome.
He is sitting with the very men who just tied the ropes around Jesus' wrists.
Peter sitting with the guards is like a whistleblower, hiding out in the corporate break room of the corrupt company he just exposed.
That's a great way to put it.
He wants the comfort and warmth of the room, but he is utterly terrified someone is going to recognize his face. It is the ultimate cognitive dissonance.
He is seeking the warmth, the comfort, and the anonymity of the enemy's fire.
That detail really exposes the immense danger of his position.
He has abandoned active participation in the kingdom. He is no longer walking the path of a disciple.
He has adopted a degraded spectator mentality.
He wants to know what will happen, but he refuses to share in the suffering.
You know, when you think about your own workplace or social circles, it is so easy to judge Peter.
Though for sure.
But how often do we do the exact same thing? We don't want to outright deny our faith, but we definitely want to warm our hands at the cultural fire.
We want the world's comfort without the world's scrutiny.
Is it possible Peter thought he was being strategic here?
What do you mean?
Could he have rationalized this as a tactical move? Like, I will act as an undercover agent, I will gather information, I will stay close enough to know what is happening, but blend in so I don't get arrested too.
The text completely dismantles that idea.
It does.
Yeah, there is no such thing as undercover Christianity in the biblical framework.
Right.
Trying to hide among the enemies of Christ is a direct result of placing the fear of man above the fear of God.
So, discipleship at a distance is internally unstable.
Yes, you cannot secretly follow the Lord while openly seeking the comfort of those who hate him.
When you sit with the servants of the high priest to watch from the sidelines, your tongue will eventually be tested.
And as we know, Peter's testimony collapses completely.
It is a devastating reality check. But as we established earlier, this passage is not primarily about Peter.
No, his failure is the dark backdrop that makes the main subject shine brighter.
Let's shift our focus to the Christological fulfillment here.
The text presents Jesus as the silent lamb.
This historical moment is a direct fulfillment of the Old Testament office of the suffering servant.
This explicitly mirrors the prophecy found in Isaiah 53, verse 7.
Right, it says, "He was oppressed and afflicted, yet he opened not his mouth."
Led like a lamb to the slaughter and like a sheep silent before its shearers.
Jesus is walking into the machinery of judgment, not because he is guilty, but because he is sovereignly bearing the guilt of others.
We also see a striking connection to the Old Testament Levitical system here.
Because Caiaphas is rushing this illegal midnight verdict. But there is a sick irony here, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Because Caiaphas isn't just a corrupt judge, he is the high priest.
Right.
Doesn't Jewish law require the high priest to meticulously inspect a sacrifice before it is slaughtered?
Yes, the high priest was required to painstakingly examine the sacrificial lamb.
To ensure it was completely without physical blemish before it could be offered on the altar.
The irony is staggering. The true, eternal Lamb of God is brought before the corrupt earthly high priest.
Caiaphas is sitting in judgment to condemn him, completely unaware that his wicked actions are actually facilitating the ultimate sacrifice.
He is inspecting the true Lamb, finding no valid fault in him, and preparing him to be slaughtered for our transgressions.
When we look at this through the lens of Reformed theology, specifically the Westminster Standards, we have to talk about Christ's obedience.
Yes, there are two facets to this: his active obedience and his passive obedience.
How do both of those manifest in this courtyard scene?
In federal theology or covenant theology, this distinction is vital. In his active obedience, Christ consciously chose to fulfill all the righteous demands of the law on our behalf.
He walked this harrowing path without resisting the Father's decree.
He actively obeyed where Adam failed, where Israel failed, and where Peter is currently failing.
He kept the covenant of works perfectly.
Yes. And then in his passive obedience, he voluntarily endured the physical violence, the false accusations, and the unrighteous judgment.
To legally secure our justification.
He submitted to the penalty of the law, paying the debt we owed.
So on one side of the courtyard, up in the elevated rooms, we have perfect divine grace and steadfast obedience. Down below, by the fire, we have a vivid display of total depravity.
Let's unpack the mechanism of that depravity. If human willpower was enough to sustain salvation, Peter would have been the one to prove it.
He had the physical proximity to Jesus, the theological knowledge, and the explicit warning from Christ himself just hours earlier.
Yet in the span of a few hours, his free will folded completely.
It physically illustrates the mechanism of total depravity, that without divine intervention, the default human posture under pressure is treason.
Peter's catastrophic failure in this moment proves that no human being can save themselves through willpower.
This text completely shatters Arminian theology.
It really does, because that theology places the weight of perseverance upon human free will.
If salvation depended on Peter's free will and his ability to choose righteousness that night, all would be lost.
Total depravity does not mean Peter is as evil as he could possibly be. It means his will is bound by his sinful nature.
He is a slave to his fear and his desire for self-preservation.
The contrast highlights our total inability to remain faithful by our own merit.
Peter's cowardice demonstrates that we desperately require a Savior who succeeds flawlessly, precisely where we fail miserably.
Christ's steadfast obedience, his perfect record, is imputed to the failing disciple.
The irony of the scene is heavy. Think about this.
What's that?
The maker of the universe, the one who holds every single atom together by his spoken word, voluntarily submits to the ropes tied by his own rebellious creatures.
It's hard to wrap your mind around.
He allows the hands he designed to bind him.
It is the ultimate display of sovereign humility. And because Christ stood firm where Peter failed, this historical reality confronts us today.
We cannot just leave this in the first century.
No, we have to look at how this addresses your daily life and the current state of the modern church.
When Matthew originally wrote this gospel, he was writing to a specific demographic.
He was writing to a community of Jewish Christians who were facing severe trials.
They were dealing with social ostracism, economic boycotts, and formal excommunication from their synagogues.
They knew what it meant to be hated by the religious and cultural establishment.
They knew the real cost of confessing Christ.
The original audience faced the daily, terrifying temptation to compromise their gospel testimony to avoid societal wrath.
They were tempted to blend in, just like Peter.
And the text acts as a stern warning against that compromise.
The direct application for you, the listener, is clear. Seeking cultural acceptability and associating closely with the world's authorities inevitably leads to denying the Lord of glory.
When you prioritize the approval of your peers over the commands of Christ, you are walking in Peter's hesitant footsteps.
We see this playing out on a massive scale in modern Christianity.
We see pragmatic and seeker-sensitive church movements that try to adapt the message to the culture.
They want to make the gospel more palatable, less offensive.
They survey the culture to see what the culture wants, and then they design their church services to meet those fleshly desires.
Those modern pragmatic movements deliberately attempt to remove the offense of the cross.
They adopt secular business models, entertainment-driven worship, and softened moral stances.
Simply to draw crowds and gain social capital.
By doing so, they're teaching their congregants to act exactly like, well, similarly to Peter.
They are training the church to warm its hands at the world's cultural fires.
Seeking comfort rather than bearing the reproach of Christ outside the camp.
The law of God demands total loyalty. There is no middle ground.
And we fail this standard daily.
We shrink back from sharing the exclusive gospel at work because we fear what our colleagues will think.
We remain silent on biblical truth because we are afraid of the cultural backlash.
Or afraid of losing our jobs or our social standing. We let the fear of man dictate our actions.
But the solution to this failure is not moralism.
Right. The pulpit must not simply declare, try harder to be brave, don't be a coward like Peter.
That is a man-centered message that relies on the very flesh that failed Peter in the first place.
The true solution is looking strictly to the substitutionary atonement of Christ.
His inexhaustible grace pardons the cowardly disciple. He restores the one who fell.
We rely entirely on the Holy Spirit's sanctifying work, motivated by immense gratitude for what Christ endured in that courtyard.
So, for the local church, how should a congregation practically respond to the heavy reality of this text?
How do we build a culture that stands firm when the world brings the pressure?
The local church must respond by maintaining strict confessional boundaries.
We have to know what we believe and state it clearly.
The church must rely entirely on the ordinary means of grace, the faithful preaching of the word, the right administration of the sacraments, and corporate prayer.
Furthermore, the church must completely reject ecumenical compromise with liberal denominations that deny the supernatural realities of the faith.
We must stand distinct, boldly confessing Christ, refusing to soften the truth for the sake of false unity.
To recap our time today, the passage we examined is dark.
It pulls back the curtain on human cowardice and institutional corruption.
It shows us the ugly reality of our own self-reliance.
But simultaneously, it shines a blindingly bright light on the sovereign, substitutionary sacrifice of the King.
He stood firm as a pillar of iron when all others fled into the night.
I want to leave you with a thrilling eschatological reality.
Oh, this is good.
Based on a biblical, premillennial view of the future found in Revelation chapter 20, we know that one day the roles we saw in this passage will be terrifyingly reversed.
Reverse how?
The wicked Caiaphas, the arrogant Sanhedrin, and all the corrupt rulers of this present age will be resurrected.
But they will not be sitting in comfortable, elevated seats of judgment.
No, they will stand bound and terrified before the great white throne judgment seat of the triumphant Christ.
The corrupt judges will face the true righteous judge.
It's an awe-inspiring thought.
Cast off your self-reliance, step out of the shadows of the courtyard, and boldly confess Christ before a hostile generation. Keep seeking truth.